having a last name, Vogel, that's closer to the end of the alphabet. When I was growing up, I always hated doing things in alphabetical order. It seemed like I always had to do that. Yay, let's do it in alphabetical order. I get to be second to last in my class again. So, I kind of like here what Jesus says at the end of the gospel today. Some that are last will be first, and some that are first will be last. But what is he actually talking about? Because he's not talking about last names. Rather, we might think about what it means to be first in the eyes of the world versus being first in the eyes of God. In the eyes of the world, someone who gets ahead of everybody else, someone who's successful in career or seemingly has everything going for them, everything's perfect in their life. Externally, they seem to have it all. They've got the best car, the biggest house, perfect health, financial ease. Or maybe it's someone who's made a name for themselves. They have prestige, they have power, they're honored, they're recognized. Maybe those are the ones that we'd be tempted to compare ourselves to want to be like them. Certainly, they're the ones that are first, right? Even blessed by God. God has given them everything. So they're first for him. I don't have those things, so maybe, I'm last. God doesn't care as much about me. But what Jesus says is that some who are last will be first, and some who are first will be last. Those earthly criteria of money and possession and power, the seemingly perfect life, those things are not what is important. They might be part of getting ahead here on earth, but they have nothing to do with being first eternally. They have very little to do with God's offer of salvation to us. Mother Teresa, she pointed this out in a speech that she gave at Harvard University in 1982. She was invited by Harvard because the way that they said it is they wanted the most famous person in one of the world's most poorest nations to address the world's richest nation. They should have known better than to say something like that, because once she was surrounded by the elites of that prestigious school, Mother Teresa reminded them, and us as well, that some of those that are last will be first, and first will be last. She said, India is not a poor nation. India is a very rich nation. She has a wealth of riches. True spiritual riches. And America is not a rich nation. America is a very poor nation. In fact, a desperately poor nation. For she slaughters even her own unborn children. Those that are last in the eyes of the world may end up being those that are the ones who can most easily reach heaven. While those that focus all their time on being first in the eyes of the world may find themselves unready to meet God, last in his eyes. Salvation has nothing to do with earthly riches, but rather those who strive to enter through the narrow gate, as Jesus says. That our effort is not placed into earthly treasures, but on the eternal ones. And it's good for us to imagine where those two possible paths, what are we striving for, where they can lead us. And I wanted to do that by using some meditations that St. Francis de Sales wrote on heaven versus hell. St. Francis says, be aware that you are between heaven and hell. That's our earthly life here. The one or the other is open to receive you, according to the choices that you make. Realize that the choice which is made in this world will last forever into the next. God himself desires earnestly that you should choose heaven. But we do have that choice. So let's imagine what those two places would look like. And maybe even, close your eyes if it helps you imagine this. As we look at St. Francis's words, first he describes what the kingdom of the enemy looks like, of Satan. He says, look at the attitude of all the wretched people that are surrounding that abominable king. some that are furious with hatred or envy or anger, others that are worn out, preoccupied, and anxious in gathering wealth, others that are obsessed with worthless things without any kind of pleasure, but only that which is useless and unsatisfying. Others are dishonest, they're depraved or corrupted by their brutish longings. See how they're without rest, without order, without composure, how they despise one another and how they pretend to love one another. Unfortunately, many of those might appear to the world to be in first place, but in reality, it's the last thing we would want. So now, in our imagination, compare this to what heaven looks like. Imagine being among the saints surrounding our Lord. So St. Francis says, "How beautiful the sight of this assembly of virgins, of men and women, whiter than the lily, this gathering of widows, full of holy self-denial and humility. See the group of numerous married persons who live together with such gentleness and in mutual respect, which cannot exist without great charity. You will see that their behavior is holy, gentle, and friendly. They listen to our Lord, and all they want is to plant him at the center of their heart. They rejoice with a joy that is courteous, charitable, and well-ordered. They love one another with a love that is holy and most pure." To the world, many of those individuals would appear to be in last place. But ultimately, that's what our hearts should long for first. So St. Francis says, choose now. Choose now. Am I going to deliberately live so as to reach heaven? Or meander unthinkingly through life along a path that leads to my destruction? And he gives us words to choose. He says, "Oh, that horrid assembly, never will you find me under your flag. I will give up forever all those follies and trivialities. King of pride, king of misery, infernal spirit, I reject you with your worthless show. I detest you with all your works. But to you I turn, my loving Jesus, King of happiness and eternal glory. I cling to you with all the powers of my spirit. I adore you with all my heart. I choose you to be my King, now and forever. I am determined to be always faithful to you, and I surrender myself to you forever. I dedicate myself to obey your holy laws and commands."